You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast, episode 7 with Benny Gold. Very excited to be here, especially with our guest, Attorney Spencer Aronfeld. They're in Miami. How you doing, Spencer?
Benny, I'm thrilled to finally meet you. It's on a podcast, but I'm glad I could finally talk to you and meet you. And congratulations for all the things you're doing.
Thank you very much. You've been here since the beginning, and I definitely appreciate all your support and everything, and returning my messages and being one of the first to be featured. You were actually featured back in October of 2017, and we launched Lawyer Stories. That's lawyer_stories on Instagram. We launched July 2017, so not too far after, we connected, and you were kind enough to send over your story, and we appreciate that.
Well, I got to tell you, as a lawyer, I appreciate what you're doing because you are spreading good images and good stories, not just local lawyers, internationally, showing the brotherhood and sisterhood of what we're doing and making us look good in a public eye that often looks at lawyers as sort of the scum of the earth. So I really appreciate what you're doing, what your message is. And the international level that you've done is extraordinary. So congratulations.
It's sort of taken off, I tried to follow some typical Instagram methods to grow the account organically. And then I started getting messages, and it's great. And I actually, I love doing it. It's really a passion project for me. It's like something that's really close to me because, I had a story. So I figured if I have a story, everybody else has a story. But let me just say something about my friend Spencer here. I know we haven't met, and this is like our virtual first meeting. But I will say this from your social media accounts. You're a great dad, I could tell, and I appreciate that because you do posts with your kids, and you have them in your videos when you can. And as a new dad, I really appreciate how you are with your kids, your son and daughter. And, you're also, another thing that's big for me is you seem like a great mentor to your associates. It looks like you're doing some fun things, but you're also teaching them how to practice law. And those are two things, that I really respect about you and that I really like about you. So, keep doing those. Those are.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm lucky I have my son here with me today. So there's Nori.
Hey, Nori.
Normally, if we weren't in the middle of this crisis, he would be in college right now, enjoying the second semester of his freshman year. So I have pulled him out of semi-retirement and said, "You better come to the office with me every single day."
Yep. And
so he's here, and I have my daughter who's also unable to attend her junior year of college right now. She's at home, but she's doing some of our marketing and social media stuff just to keep her engaged in what's happening.
Okay.
As for the associates, I feel it's an obligation that I have, not just as their employer, but as the senior lawyer, to teach them. And we spend quite a bit of time every day.
Yep.
We have like a 4-hour session, 4 hours from 8 in the morning to about noon.
Wow.
Going through the cases one by one and strategizing with them and figuring out what needs to be done. So it's like a mini seminar every day on federal litigation as to how and they're teaching me stuff too because I'm doing this 30 years, but they've got cutting edge technology and ideas. And so it goes back and forth.
Yeah, no, that's really, I think that's great. I think that's the type of, boss and anybody coming out of law school or who really wants to learn an area of law needs. So I appreciate that.
But you'd be surprised, Benny, how many people don't want it. How many people do not want, I have been confronted with this more times than not, where they come out of law school and they're like, "Don't tell me anything. I know what I'm doing."
Really?
Do not and have resented my teaching or my methodology. So it takes a student willing to learn as much as it takes a teacher willing to teach.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's all types that come out of law school. I think you got those people who have the entrepreneurial spirit and just want to go right to it and do it themselves. And then there's other people who I think do need a mentor and do need to be shown the type of, the way that it works. Because I think in law school, if you're not doing a lot of the practical externships and those sorts of things, you're really going to miss out on how to really do anything. I mean, you learn the theories, but you need to know the practice.
Well, it's funny you mention that, Ben, because I, as you know, I started my own practice right out of law school 30 years ago.
Yep.
And have made a tremendous amount of mistakes, and I continue to make mistakes, some of which I've learned really the hard way. But I have written a book about how to maximize and facilitate that transition from law school, law student to lawyer to law firm owner.
Right.
Sharing a lot of the mistakes I made. And if anyone that's watching this has the time now with the virus, it's a short read, but it's one I highly recommend so that you can learn from some of the mistakes I've made and get the most out of that transition.
Yep.
Like finding the right mentor. I mean, if I had found the wrong mentors, which I could have, and some of the mentors I had were not the right mentors, it helps you figure out how to find the right mentor to help you make that transition.
Right. No, that's excellent. That's great. And I did have your books written down, touch on those. So like the thing that I've been asking some of the podcast guests, where like lawyer stories sort of came from, is my interest in, when you as a student or a person, or I think in your case, it was in a high school in Wichita, you had that light went on and you had that epiphany or that moment where you said, I'm going to be a lawyer. I like to advocate for people. Like, this is what I'm going to do. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, the truth is, Benny, I wanted to be a professional bicycle racer. I mean, if you had asked me in my junior year of high school what I wanted to be, I would have said I want to win the Tour de France.
Nice.
The problem was, as a Jewish kid growing up in Wichita, Kansas, I had absolutely no talent whatsoever, no natural ability, no athletic ability. And bless my parents, they supported me in this mission. And I went to Europe and tried to race and got my ass kicked pretty hard.
Okay.
And I ended up coming back to the States and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And one event that you're referring to that occurred in high school was sort of representing a childhood friend of mine who was very fatally ill. I mean, she had a very serious illness, which I did not appreciate at the time, and had amassed a bunch of parking tickets. It gets me a little emotional thinking about it.
Okay.
Because it really was a life-changing moment for me. She had amassed all these parking tickets. I did not know that she had this fatal disease, and she was parking in the handicap spot without a handicap sticker. So I went and tried to argue for her as to why she shouldn't have these parking tickets.
Right.
Clearly, the people who were in charge of that parking spot realized far quicker than I did how sick this lady was, how sick this young child was. I mean, she had to be 17 years old, and she died shortly thereafter.
Oh, geez, wow!
But they waived all the parking tickets,
okay.
And that event changed me because I was like, wait a second, maybe the talent that God gave me is to help people who can't speak for themselves. Maybe that's what my reason is.
And that's sort of interesting because I know you like to fight like sort of like the Goliaths, like you take on big companies now, and sort of the analogy maybe would be like you're going up against the school back then, and so it's sort of all
exactly the dynamic, man. Yeah. It's representing the weak and the injured against the machine, the power.
Right.
And it changed me, and I was like, wow, that may be. I'm not an athlete, and I'm not going to be a supermodel or a movie star. But maybe that's the road that God's given me to have that strength. So that launched me. I didn't know what to do with that. My dad was the one who kept saying, you should go to law school. And I was so intimidated then by the academic rigors of what I perceived law school to be.
Right.
I did not think I had the capacity to excel in law school because I didn't do particularly well in high school or particularly well in college or particularly well on that LSAT test. I mean, they were humbling experiences. I was like, man, I don't think I have the engine to be a lawyer. But when I got into law school at University of Miami, all of a sudden I was doing better in school than I'd ever done. It was just a natural fit for me.
Because you were passionate about what you were studying. And I think when you study something you love, you do well at it. You know, that was episode 6, which will be released soon. Like we were talking about the same thing. If you have a love for something, you're going to excel at it, right? That's how I feel.
Much like my job, you know, 99% of my job, well, it's probably more like 90% of my job, I love, and I don't even realize it's a job.
Right.
The fact that I get paid to do it and make money doing it is a bonus and a surprise. But it's provided me a wonderful lifestyle, but it's never been and continues not to be a motivating factor for me at all.
Yeah.
It really is a lot of internal reward.
That's great. One thing I did want to ask you is, how did you end up in Miami?
Well,
I know you went to law school there, but
yeah, so I was in Europe, you know, kicking myself in the head, trying to be a professional bike racer at 17, 18 years old. Imagine, Benny, a time when there's no cell phones, no internet, no satellite television, and most people in Italy where I lived at that time didn't even speak English. And I remember calling my grandmother up, who, like most Jewish boys, their grandmothers lived in, you know, Miami Beach in those days. Yeah. And she was like, you know, I don't know what you're doing there in Milan in February in the sleet and the snow. Why don't you come home to Miami? It's 80 degrees and we're going to the beach today. And then I'm going to the delicatessen and we're going to have Passover and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, Grandma, I'm on my way.
Yeah. And then that was it.
I came here and moved in with my grandmother. Yep. And after about a week or two of sitting around her house, she was like, you got to get a job and you need to go to college, which I had not really planned to do. I'd sort of sabotaged any potential college plans because I wanted this bike racing thing to turn out.
Right.
And the University of Miami, without an SAT test, accepted me as a foreign student because I had gone and lived in Europe. And I came into UM as a foreign student, as English as a second language. And that's how I ended up in Miami. The University of Miami accepted me. Had they not, I probably would have ended up probably back in Kansas or Colorado or someplace, you know, that would have maybe taken me.
So University of Miami Law School, or didn't you go to Wichita undergrad or no?
No, I'm from Wichita.
Right.
And I went to high school there. I went to University of Miami undergrad.
Got it. Okay.
And then graduated from undergrad and then went to University of Miami Law School.
Okay.
But UM accepted me, and that's how I ended up staying in Miami.
Yeah, my uncle actually went to UM Law back in the day. We could talk about that later.
What year did he graduate?
Yeah, he might. I don't know. I think he might be a few years apart. He's an attorney down there in South Florida as well. I could tell
What's
you
his name?
after the show.
Okay.
They're named. No, it doesn't matter. They're named after. Actually, it's my mom's side of the family, who's my son's named after. The last name's Shane. But they're very, very good immigration lawyers down there. And my cousin works at a big firm. He's a great lawyer as well. One question I want to ask is, like, so right out of law school, right? You go through Miami Law, and then you Miami or Kane for a few years. And
I'm still a Kane.
You're still a Kane, right? You're once a Kane.
Yeah.
So did you just the U, right? Is that it? The U right here?
That's something they didn't have when I was there, but that's the symbol now.
U. Okay. So did you start your firm right after, like, or did you do anything like what made you go and start?
So I had this vision while I was in law school that was completely based upon my best friend in law school. He wanted to be a big law firm lawyer doing international law.
Yeah.
And that guy, who I'm still best friends with, actually became a big international lawyer doing international law. He's now like a managing partner of White & Case. And he lives in Brazil, and he flies all over the world first class. And he had this lifestyle envisioned back in law school that I sort of latched onto. And so I said, oh, that sounds great. You know, we'll be in Paris one day and Rome the next day. I had no idea what they actually, to be honest, I still don't understand what he does. But I know it involves a lot of travel and 5-star hotels.
Yep.
The problem was none of those law firms were interested in even interviewing me. So we would sign up for these interviews and, you know, they would fly him to New York or fly him to California for interviews and no one was even responding to me. He brought a lot more to the table for that kind of job than I would have ever brought. So as I'm getting through law school and coming closer to graduation, I had no offers. I had no interviews. And I graduated with honors from law school. Wow. No one was interested in hiring me.
Wow.
It was a very tough time in '91, but a lot of it had to do with just this personality. I wasn't going to be or never be sort of an associate in a firm.
I feel like it's like that now too. I mean, it's like, it's so difficult to get a job, you know?
I don't know the current job market. We're having a difficult time hiring, to be honest with you. I mean, we've been trying to hire, but we do a very niche type of practice here. But just to answer your question, Benny, I couldn't get a job, so I made up my own job. I created my own law firm about a block away from where I am right now.
There you have it.
And I, since 1991, have been my own self-employed law firm owner. I employ associates now and paralegals and law firm administrators and bookkeepers and receptionists and all that stuff. But I mean, I started just on my own because no one would hire me.
Wow, that's amazing. So, you know, obviously there's a business piece and like you go out, you're like you get the clients. So you had to learn a lot. I mean, you had to learn a lot more than just practicing law probably, right?
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, one of the banes of my existence is that I've never run the firm until recently as a business. I always ran it as, you know, I'm a lawyer and I would take cases on regardless of the financial consequences because I was so busy being a lawyer.
Right.
That came to a grinding halt about 10 years ago. But for many, many years, for the first 2/3 of my career, I made money in spite of myself.
Yeah. Wow.
Because the skill set of being a great lawyer and the skill set of being a great law firm owner are completely different.
Right. Right.
And so yeah. I spent a lot of time trying to teach myself how to be a lawyer. I had no one teaching me, so I sought out people who would teach me. And but I had no idea about, you know, money and how to balance the checking accounts and making sure that we had money in reserve. And
now you had to set up a payroll system. But did you start off, like when you start off, did you like split an office, build like, so you could use somebody's fax machine and like their copier and then kick ideas around with somebody, you know? I
actually started off in the law school library at the University of Miami.
Okay. Wow.
And practiced there for about 6 months before they figured out what I was doing. Finally, someone called me in and said, what the hell is going on here? Because they had conference rooms and they had secretaries and they had, of course, in those days, you didn't have online access to books and they had a copy machine. And I actually did some depositions and things in there before they threw me out.
Wow.
And then someone heard this story because it was published in the newspaper down here. There's a Daily Business Review, which is a big legal newspaper, published a story about some kid who was practicing out of the local library. And I got
have that framed. Do you have that framed in your office somewhere? You need to get.
I had it framed in our previous office that I was in for nearly 30 years. We've since moved. We just moved into an office here that's like a high rise.
Congratulations. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. But for 30 years, I was on the ground floor on the street. But I got all these lawyers that read the article and they offered me space and they offered me cases and they were so tickled by this. Of course, the space wasn't great and the cases they were sending me weren't great, but I didn't know the difference. And so I ended up sharing an office or getting a little closet of an office for some guy. And that's how it started.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because when I was barred in Connecticut, I moved without a job. You know, I didn't know anybody. And, you know, I kind of connected with a guy at my swearing in. He was sort of a seasoned attorney and he offered me space, but I didn't take it because I ended up moving there and finding a temp job and then ended up in a permanent job. And I took sort of a different path, but I'm always interested in the entrepreneurial, like I started my own law firm from scratch. Nobody helped me. Like, I love those stories. I mean, that's one of my favorite storylines. So I really appreciate that.
It's been, I don't know what it would have been like to have had a mentor, an employer, to someone to tell me what to do and show me what to do. I can't imagine. My life would be very different. I would be very, very different.
Right. So that's awesome. That's great. Thanks for sharing that with us. So like you're very involved in the community. I know you're always like, you post about local shops and try this play. I think that's terrific. One thing you do is Lawyers to the Rescue. Like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this happened after the earthquake in Haiti about 10 years ago. Do you remember that? There was this horrible earthquake in Haiti and tens of thousands of people died.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And I wanted to help. At that point in my life, I had a lot of resources, and I had envisioned myself going down there. How could I go down there and actually help these people? And I spoke to a friend of mine who's an attorney, and he's Haitian. And he said, you could go down there, but you would be literally risking your life. There's no guarantee that you'd come back. It's so dangerous.
Right.
So I said, well, what can I do to help? And he said, well, they need money. And I said, well, that's an easy thing for me to do. I'm used to asking people for money. That's what I do for a living, is asking people for money who are hurt. So on Facebook, and this is 10 years ago, I put together this kind of auction where people could bid on things that I would get just walking down the street. I went to the Mercedes dealer. They just handed me like a watch and said, okay, you can have this. I went to the wine store. They go, here's a case of wine and a wine tasting. No one said no. The pizza place, here's a dinner for 6. Whatever I asked for, they gave it to me.
Wow.
I went to a restaurant and I said, can we put this, silent auction thing together in your restaurant? They're like, great, and we'll give away free beer. Before I knew it, a couple hundred people showed up. Everyone donated money. And I had this big thing of cash, and I went and gave it to them. And I said, this feels like not a lawyerly thing. It feels like this is something that, a local Hadassah or my kids' Girl Scout troop could have done this. It didn't feel like I was leveraging my skill set as a lawyer. And so I was trying to find a way that the lawyer could go to where legal needs are needed.
Right.
Like Doctors Without Borders goes to like medical places. Where can we go to? There's a crisis where lawyers are needed. And it didn't take too long for that whole BP oil spill catastrophe that happened in Louisiana. And someone called me and said, hey, there's a lot of need for lawyers down there. They're asking Cambodians and Vietnamese people to sign documents. And why doesn't that organization of yours go down there and try to help them? The problem was there really wasn't much of an organization. It was sort of me and some people who had made donations. And so to make it more official, I thought we should turn this Lawyers to the Rescue into a real non-for-profit with a board of directors and framework and corporate documents and make it an organization so that we're not just out there unorganized.
Wow.
And so we did that. And we have a board of directors. We have a group of people.
Wow.
And we've tried to provide free legal services. One of the fundamental things, Ben, is that no work can we ever make money on it. Everything has to be pro bono. No one's ever remunerated for any of the work. And after we did a few things, the thing in BP in Louisiana, a tsunami in Japan, some things for the Humane Society, I went to the local homeless shelter here and said, maybe we can serve a meal. Maybe these lawyers can come with their fancy suits on and actually serve a meal to the homeless.
Yeah.
And they were all up for that. We went to the homeless shelter. It's called the Camilla's House. And as we're serving the meal to the homeless community, they would start asking us questions about, hey, aren't you a lawyer? Can you help me with this arrest warrant I have? Or I don't have documentation, or I've been trying to get divorced from this guy for 20 years. Even personal injury questions. And so we started sitting down with them in the cafeteria at the homeless shelter, giving them on the fly legal services.
Wow.
so the Camilla's House, which is the largest homeless facility in South Florida, maybe in Florida, they said, you know what, we need your help. And they gave us an office, they gave us support staff, and it's become now, instead of looking around the world as to where Lawyers to the Rescue can help, we're just looking in our own backyard.
That's amazing.
As to how we can provide free legal services to the homeless on a continual basis, not just some once in a while type of thing.
That's amazing.
And it's been 10 years since we've been doing it.
So there's a lot of attorneys in the area involved?
Well, not as many as I would like, but there's a couple dozen that come to. We have a monthly pro bono legal clinic. There's great. A couple dozen that come. They take on cases on a pro bono basis.
Okay.
We have externships with the University of Miami, so their law students get extern credit for working at Lawyers to the Rescue. We invite the general community to come because sometimes it's good, Benny, to show our children how blessed we are by showing how difficult life is for other people. A lot of people have no idea how difficult it is.
Spence, my full-time job, I'm the executive director of 4 public housing authorities in North Central Mass. So that's what I do. I practiced law for a while, and but so I know exactly what you're saying, and I really respect and like that you're doing, a piece of your time is going to that. That's great. Congratulations on that effort.
I appreciate that. And for a lot of sole practitioners or small law firm owners that they don't have a setup to do pro bono work. These big law firms have these giant pro bono programs and everything. But for a sole practitioner that wants to feel good about being a lawyer and once a month donate a couple of hours to helping those who need our help the most, it's a very easy thing to do. Awesome. So it'd be great if anyone's interested or contributing to it. It's a non-for-profit, tax-free deduction, lawyerstotherescue.org. Please check out the website, and we would love to have you come to one of our pro bono clinics. That would be awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. So, and another thing you've done is I think you touched on your book a little bit, Make It Your Own. And you have the book, Sarah Rose, Kid Lawyer. I'm curious about that, what that's all.
That, my daughter Sarah Rose and my son Nori are both characters in the book, but my daughter Sarah Rose was in 4th grade, and her teacher asked me, as she asked all the parents, if they'd come read a story to the class. You're going to get that request soon. And I said, yeah, what do you want me to read? And she said, well, aren't you a lawyer? Why don't you read some story about lawyers? And I'm like, okay. And I went online, and there were no children's books that I could find that talked about what lawyers do. And I just ended up writing the story myself, thinking that it would go no further than this class. I never thought it would ever become a book or a story or be illustrated or be for sale on Amazon or anything like that. But while I was out there pitching my book about how to become a lawyer and how to make that transition, that book I was pitching to different publishers, they're like, well, what else have you written? And I said, well, I have written this book about, kid lawyers. And they're like, that we like. And so that ended up getting published first.
That's awesome.
And it's available on Amazon. It's a fast read. I highly recommend it. I'd also recommend, if you're interested in the book, rather than buy it from Amazon, there's a local bookstore here in Miami called Books and Books. And as you pointed out, I'm always trying to support local merchants, small family-owned businesses. I have empathy for them as a sole practitioner. I have my own firm, but as a law firm owner, always trying to support the little guy. So if you're interested in either of my books, if you have small kids at home up to, say, maybe 12 years old, and then they could probably read the book themselves. It's called Sarah Rose, Kid Lawyer. Please get it from Books and Books or Amazon. You can download it on Kindle and have it, instantly.
Love it. So we have a few minutes left, and I know you could probably talk for a while on, since you said you train your lawyers 4 hours a day, on what it's like to sue a big cruise line. I mean, that's really the heart of what you're doing now. I don't know if you could have a summary for about what that's like. I mean, especially now, it's there's not really many cruises going out. And I just want to also mention that I hope everybody's doing well who's listening. I hope everybody's staying safe. I know I've mentioned it in my last podcast, and please adhere to your local, state, and federal governments, and wash your hands. stay social distance from everybody. But regarding your cruise lines and suing a cruise ship, there's got to be a lot that goes into that. Do most of the cases settle, or are you in court a lot trying cases?
Well, most of the cases get dismissed. It is a very narrow needle to thread to successfully hold a cruise line liable for the injuries that occur to a passenger on a cruise or an excursion. Very difficult. The laws are written in such a way that you have to prove, and it's almost impossible under most circumstances, that the cruise line knew of the dangerous condition that caused the passenger to get hurt. Really? So if our typical client is this little old lady from Wichita who's never been on a cruise before, and on her first day, she hears they got free coffee on the Lido deck, and she goes down there at 7 in the morning and slips and falls and breaks her pelvis on the Lido deck, proving what caused her to fall, what the liquid was on the deck, how long it had been there, and that Carnival or Royal Caribbean or Celebrity knew about it, or should have known about it, is almost impossible.
So they gets thrown out. So they're not going to just settle with you, right? I mean,
well, it depends how bad they want to fight, but a lot of cases are settled for far less than what we would want, because of the risk of, if we don't resolve it and they bring this up to the judge, there's a very strong possibility the judge could dismiss the case. And most federal judges down here in South Florida, because cruise lines for the most part, Ben, require that lawsuits be filed here, regardless of where the accident happened. So the lady from Wichita who gets hurt on a Carnival ship that leaves from Seattle still has to come to Miami to sue them.
Right.
So most of the federal judges on the federal bench in the Southern District of Florida have very little empathy or desire to have a cruise ship passenger injury trial. So if they can get a case dismissed on summary judgment, most of them will do that.
Okay.
And we do the best we can to try to get evidence that the cruise line either knew or should have known of the dangerous condition. But when we can't, if we don't settle it cheaply, they will move to dismiss the case on summary judgment. And in a lot of cases, not just our cases, but cases from other law firms as well, get dismissed on summary judgment frequently because of that high standard of proof.
Yeah, there was that case I saw on the news about that young kid who fell off the grandfather out the window. That was terrible.
I'm glad I didn't get that case. Of course, had I been contacted, I'm sure I would have looked into it, but I'm grateful that I did not have that case. It's just a sad tragedy.
Very, very.
Because in order to prevail, you'd have to prove that Royal Caribbean knew that these windows created a dangerous condition that the average person couldn't tell there was glass here. Right. And I don't know what the evidence in that case turned out to be, but that's a very tough case.
It's difficult. So, and very, very sad. So we're going to have to actually wrap it up. How can people get a hold of you? And is there anything else that you wanted to?
Thanks again, Benny, for giving me this opportunity. Anyone who has any questions about a potential cruise ship passenger injury case or just a regular car accident, slip and fall here in Florida, please reach out to me at my last name, Aronfeld. Hopefully you can put it down there. I don't know if you can. Aronfeld at aronfeld.com.
Yep.
Okay. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody. If you read one of my books, if it's helped you or not, I'd be happy to hear what your thoughts are. And hopefully we'll see you at a Lawyers to the Rescue event in the near future. That'd be awesome.
Great. Thank you so much, Spence. Spencer Aronfeld, great guy to know. Look him up on social media. Great attorney, great community guy, and all-around person to connect with on social media. Always active there. Thanks again for being part of our episode 7. This was our first video that we took, and it was a great time. Nori, I hope everything goes well. If you can get back to school, learn as much as you can from your dad. Out there. And
we'll get Nori to take a picture. We'll post it on Instagram now of doing this podcast.
Sure, yeah. And I'd just like to tell everybody, wherever they are in the world today, enjoy themselves. And please be safe out there as well.
And Benny, I'm here in this building. I think there's 3 people in the whole building. I don't want anyone to misconstrue that I've got the office up and running. Okay. I'm here with Nori, but there's no other member of my firm here. We're all working remotely.
Stay safe. Get your runs in, hopefully.
Yeah.
But
Thanks,
great to
Benny.
talk to you, Spence. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure, buddy.
All right,
God
we'll be in
bless.
touch. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Lawyer Stories podcast is produced by Marketing the Law. Are you looking at your social presence every day? Potential clients are. Learn how to magnetize your brand with the help of Marketing the Law. Find us on Instagram at Marketing the Law to learn more.